Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're really happy you're here. Um, Steve, you want to turn your camera on? And David, here we go. We got our full panel here. I want to welcome you. This is going to be a fast 2 hours. What we're going to do, my name's Karen Dunn, and this is Pama, members of Pama, and they're going to talk to you today about career opportunities in the pro audio product industry. And we're going to start with an overview. We'll have the day in the life, and each of them will talk to you about how they got to where they are now. They'll talk about their current position, and then they'll talk about their companies and their place in industry and also their culture. After that, we're going to talk about what you guys can expect for a career position in this industry. And then we're going to wrap it up talking about how to interview, especially now with everything shut down, everything's virtual. So how do you make the most of a virtual interview? What's different about it? How to make it a memorable interview and a positive experience. And then we'll wrap it all up with a Q&A. So these webinars are really interactive, so please post in the chat as much as you want. And if you have questions, you can start putting them in now. We most likely will hold the questions until the end, but we will, if you get some good ones now, we'll start right away. So what I want to do first is launch a poll. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to tell you who's here today. So here is our first poll. So we want to find out who you are. So if you guys can answer that. So today we have Greg Beebe. He's the Director of Pro Audio at Sennheiser. We have David Fuller. He's the Senior Director of Live Sound Product Strategy at QSC. Steve Johnson is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Audix. And Chris Regan is the co-founder and president of RF Venue. So we'll see how you guys are voting. Get those votes in. Oh, you guys are from all over the place. That's great. Ohio, Arizona, Atlanta, North Carolina. Very cool. So we'll give you a couple more minutes to answer this poll. And then we have a second poll after this one. And while you guys are finishing up this one, why don't I throw it to Chris? Chris is the current president of Pama. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Pama is and what you guys are doing?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I think this is going to be really fun. It's a great sort of two-way communication opportunity for us to get to know you guys and what you're interested in. So just like Karen said, make sure you ask a lot of questions. That'll really keep it keep this interesting. So don't be shy, ask a question. PAMA stands for the Pro Audio Manufacturers Alliance. And PAMA is a group of companies in the pro audio industry that manufacture products. A little bit different than an AES or a NAM type of organization. We're sort of very focused on the manufacturing side, the product side. And we're all about promoting high quality audio. So that could be through different events, different open meetings that we have that you're welcome to join, where we have experts from the industry give presentations. And we also collectively pool information with each other to gain insight in what's going on in the pro audio market. And it's a great group of professionals across the industry, across different brands. Most of them you've probably heard of. It's gear that you're probably very familiar with from companies like Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, Harman, Biamp, Shure, D&B, QSC. So there's some really great brands involved, and it's an exciting organization. So a great place to follow what we're up to is on LinkedIn. So if you look up PAMA on LinkedIn, toss us a follow there, and you can get notices about when we have open meetings.
Great. Okay. So you see, most of you are students. So thank you for coming. And now we're going to do our second poll. So career opportunities. So these are typical entry level and internship opportunities. And why don't you check in there which ones you guys are most interested in? And it'll give our panelists an idea of what you're looking at. Well, that's interesting. So, Steve, is this the direction you were, can you see the results yet? No, okay. We'll just give it one more minute and then we're going to end this poll and let everybody see how you guys voted in this. Oh, we have GR Johnson's in Texas looking for opportunities in sound design or audio post. There we go. Okay, we're going to close this one up and share the results. There we go. So there's something in all these categories, so that's great.
Cool.
Yeah. So, okay, well, good. So we're done with the polls and let's start. We're going to start with everybody's personal path to where they are now. So Greg Beebe, can you start this off and talk a little bit about how you got to where you are, what you're doing now, and about your company?
Yes, of course. Thank you. And welcome everyone to this panel. And please heed the advice. Make this memorable by asking every question you can imagine. We're here to help. So good news and bad news. The good news is I was a student as well a long time ago, 29 years ago to be exact. And 29 years ago, I was sitting waiting for an appointment with the dean, and I was looking through a newspaper. That's actually something that you touched, and you held it up and you were able to read it tactily. And there was a section of this newspaper called the Help Wanted ads, because I knew I needed a job. It was right before I was to graduate, and I was studying electrical engineering, and I saw this company called Sennheiser. I didn't know what they didn't know anything about audio. I studied electrical engineering, but Sennheiser was near the beach. I was single, and I said, this is definitely a great way to meet women. So I'm going to apply to this company. And 3 interviews, 9 people later, I get offered this job. And I start working at Sennheiser as a application engineer. I'm not going to tell you the whole history because it's boring, but effectively for 14 years of my career, I focused on the United States and engineering topics, product topics, sales, marketing. But for 15 years of it, I really focused outside the United States, doing sales, marketing, human resources, finance, marketing, managing profit and loss statements, things like that. And really a day in the life today exists. I'm going to pretend we don't have COVID anymore. Really spending time with customers, visiting markets, understanding the dynamics and intricacies of how commerce is conducted, visiting with our subsidiaries around the world and listening and engaging, traveling with salespeople, this windshield time where, it really inspires me to think through how we could be more efficient in product ideas. Spent a lot of time in Germany. And that's pretty much my background, how I got involved in audio. I didn't know anything about it. Clearly, 29 years later, it's a passion. I've been very fortunate to do all that I did in one company. And I guess I'll come back to that later on based on some of your questions.
Great. Steve, why don't you go next and tell everybody about you?
Okay, sounds good. Making sure you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just like Greg. Hey, Greg, I didn't know this. We share something. I too studied engineering. I was an electrical engineer, and got a few more years on Greg. So we won't talk about the 29 versus 30, whatever I'm in. But several decades ago, I was a young engineering student, and really the reason I got into engineering was I thought, wouldn't it be great to do something in audio? And my idea of audio was more home audio, concept of pro audio didn't even enter my mind. It was more this notion of, I like listening to music. I played in bands and things like that, but again, didn't equate that there was an opportunity in pro audio. My engineering studies were split between my music studies. I spent a lot of time and met my wife, violinist wife, also on the music side of things at Kansas State University, where I went. There wasn't really anything purely audio related there. I took some electronic music courses and things like that to learn, but pretty clear as I was getting near the end that if I was going to be making money as an engineer, I was going to be working in typical engineering type roles. So went to Motorola in Phoenix, actually Scottsdale, and worked for the I can't remember what it was called anymore. It's a long time ago, but basically aerospace engineering, and started off there. Long story short, moved around within Motorola, did a few other things there, always on the engineering side, moved into product management, but again, always, worked on cell phones, first generation flip phones for people who remember such things. And then I saw a blind ad in the Chicago Tribune, if people remember magazines or newspapers, that's also another one, for a company that did audio somewhere in Evanston, Illinois, which I knew it was probably Shure because I had plenty of Shure phono cartridges. If people remember phono. Boy, this is getting old and sad. But anyway, I followed up on that ad, and sure enough, it was Shure. And in '93, I joined Shure. And that's really when I made my transition into pro audio. Didn't even know anything about it, really. I played in bands. I'd used microphones. I thought I'd use Shure microphones. They were actually EV microphones. That's another story entirely. But I found myself there as working in and made the transition into product management there. Eventually became the VP of marketing, was there for 10 years, left there, and have, unlike, this is where I've totally diverged from Greg, 29-year man, or however many year man at Sennheiser. Mine has been one of those that's bounced around in the industry a little bit, learned things everywhere along the way. Worked for Shure, which is obviously a large company. More recently, I was with another small company, Community Loudspeakers. Prior to that, Bosch, which owns Electro Voice and Dynacord and some of those brands you may be familiar with. So a lot of that, my career, I went from product management into marketing. At Community, I was actually CEO there. That was my most recent stint when we sold that company to Biamp, which for those of you who don't know Biamp, I mean, Biamp has a music history background, but they're more primarily in like conferencing and such. That's when I decided to try my hand again back into microphones. So I rejoined a microphone company, Audix. Many of you may not know who Audix is. Audix is a company that's been around since '84. Not as famous as Sennheiser or Shure, some of these other names you'll hear, but certainly passionate and kind of experts in a few areas, and well known for things like our D6 microphone for kick drum, et cetera. So happy to be here, happy to have had the chance to try so many different things. So I'm looking forward to, as Greg says, hearing what the questions are, seeing if we can help. The reason, I mean, just one last thing, the reason I'm really excited about a panel like this is because there wasn't something like this that I could listen to X years ago and see where the opportunities are. My thought of how I could either go work for a consumer audio company, which didn't really make sense because most of those were out of Japan at the time, and I wasn't that guy, or maybe do something related more to audio engineering, which frankly I didn't know anything about, but I was always fascinated by it. I'd read all the liner notes about all these people that did this stuff. So I find where I've landed myself in this is really cool, because we're able to touch the creative, see all the creative process. It's very creative, very exciting, and yet it puts food on the table. It makes for a good career, a lot of fun. I've gone places and met people and done things I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever be able to. And it's all because I was working with an audio manufacturing company, being backstage with people, getting to meet my idols, spending time with Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock. I mean, my God, it doesn't get any better than that. So with that, I'll shut up and let Karen take over.
It just shows that you can want to hang out with creatives. You can be a creative and get into a pro audio company, right? That you guys are looking for that kind of thing.
Yep.
So, David, why don't you talk a little bit about your path to QSC?
My path has very humble beginnings. I'm not an engineer like some of these other smart people. And it's a path that may actually resonate a little bit more with the students, I think, because I started out in New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand. Most people think I'm Australian or South African or English. No, I'm from New Zealand. I left high school. I went, I was a gigging musician. So I did what all gigging musicians do when they leave high school. I went to work for a music store. Spent 9 years there. I pretty quickly got sick of the late nights and the weekends. So I was looking for something else to do. And I had friends in the sort of TV and film industry that were letting me know that this little project called Lord of the Rings was coming down the pipeline. So I started putting my feelers out to get into post-production, sound design, that sort of thing, which I think a lot of students here are probably into. And I just could not crack into that. As much as I tried, I could not break into it. I actually left the music store. I was unemployed for about 3 or 4 months. I did Pro Tools training classes. I interned at recording studios. And when the checking account was starting to run dry, someone approached me and said, "Look, we need a sales rep for these products. They're PA products. You know them very well because you used to gig with them. JBL, Audix, QSC, Allen and Heath." So, I mean, here was a job, paid money. I got a company car. I got an allowance for gasoline, which we call petrol everywhere else in the world, but here it's gasoline. Um, and man, that was great. So I jumped on board, and within 5 years of doing that in New Zealand, I'd kind of got a bit of a reputation internationally with some of the manufacturers. So I got offered a job at JBL Professional, moved to California, traveled the world, went everywhere from, goodness me, Colombia, Venezuela, all the way to South Africa, all over the globe, China, Vietnam, and it was wonderful. Great experience. So here I was sort of thinking that my dream was sort of post-production, which might maybe lead to film scoring later on because I'm a musician. And I did this complete 180, and I ended up working for a manufacturer. No regrets whatsoever, because I probably would have been pretty rubbish at film scoring or anything like that. So that's kind of how I ended up at QSC, very much along the same lines. At QSC, I've worked in application engineering. I built a tech support team, and then I ran international sales for a couple of years. And I sort of transitioned into this role, which I was really fascinated by, which is product development, and never looked back. Now I'm in charge of the product strategy. I have product managers reporting to me, and we get to dream up cool stuff.
Very nice. Okay, and then Chris, with you, you're kind of in a different position because you co-founded RF Venue and you're the president. So why don't you talk about your path there?
Yeah, sure. That's so interesting. I hang out with these guys all the time, and I've never heard any of those stories. So I learned a lot today. Yeah, I'm coming at things from more of an entrepreneurial angle, I think. And I graduated college with a music degree. I studied recording and I did a thesis that concentrated on recording and composition. I played piano, keyboards, toured around in a band, played Hammond, B3 kind of trio stuff in the early 2000s. Had a blast doing that. And I graduated with the music degree. It was a liberal arts education, so I studied all kinds of stuff. I tried to get any acoustics type of exposure I could. So, physics, that kind of thing. And yeah, I've always just been like really passionate and fascinated by sound and music. I sort of got the bug trading concert tapes, way back in the day. And how concerts were recorded and microphones and preamps, and I was just like, what is all this? And it sort of satisfied these sort of two interests of mine, which are kind of the alignment of technology and audio, which I guess maybe the third would be sort of the creative arts, which I think is largely inflicted everyone in the Zoom call. So I graduated college. I responded to a Craigslist post looking for a market research intern to look into the microphone market, the studio recording microphone market. And I had just completed a recording project. I knew a fair amount of it, not really at the time, but thought I knew more. And I took that internship and was on the founding team of a microphone brand called Crowley and Tripp microphones. It was later acquired by Shure, but these were really high quality ribbon microphones that had some really interesting patented transducer technology. And so through the awesome team that founded that company, I got exposed to the creative side of business, which I think is really not highlighted enough when you think about corporate and working in a established company. The amount of creativity required has a direct reward. So I learned to kind of channel those interests into developing products. What should it look like? What are the features people care about? What do they not care about? How can we design products and build a supply chain so that we can efficiently manufacture them and distribute this? So I effectively was like salesperson, product management, customer service, like sort of did everything. I was traveling around to recording studios, hung out in concert halls. It was very entrepreneurial, just pure hustle, no venture capital, jackpot in the bank to sort of make it all go. We had to hustle for every dollar. And so I got a really good experience from that. And then I went on to graduate school and got an MBA while I was working. I worked at APT, which is an audio codec company out of Northern Ireland. They were acquired by a French company called Automat that was sort of on the radio broadcast side of things, which was interesting, working for a foreign company to build the business in the US. And then, ultimately I came back with some of the folks from the Crowley and Tripp microphone business to found RF Venue. And we sort of identified this pervasive problem in wireless audio. When I say wireless audio, I mean wireless microphones, in-ear monitors, production communications, that kind of thing, where there was this trend of sort of more and more wireless devices competing for less and less available RF spectrum. So we came up with a bunch of innovative antennas, different accessory products that would plug into your Shure Wireless or your Sennheiser IEM or whatever it is, to make them work and sound a lot better. And, as the founder there and CEO, I also was then in a position to build out functions in the business. So how do we market the products? What does our sales organization look like? Supply chain, kind of a leveled up version of what I had done before. And that has since grown into a larger kind of high growth pro audio manufacturing business that now is distributed worldwide. And we have all these incredible partners and folks that we work with now in a much bigger team than when we started. So it's a little bit of a different entryway. It's much more risk involved, but it's been very satisfying. And if you can kind of develop that entrepreneurial mindset and leverage some of the creative forces that you have going, this could be two very powerful things when done correctly. And if you find the right mentors and the right people that have the experience to develop you and to guide you in that process. So hopefully that's a good background.
Yeah, that was great. And definitely a different perspective.
Sure.
If you guys could each touch on even though you're all pro audio companies, your company each has a different culture, right? There's different things. So if you could just briefly talk about that before we move on. Greg, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so Sennheiser is a family-owned German company, third generation, and it's a family essentially. So we know the owners, and the owners know us. It's pretty good in the sense that there's no stockholder, no banks, no one really to answer to other than the family, which is good and also bad, right? Because the bad is that you can only do a certain amount of things, whereas if you're publicly traded or you have investors, you may be able to take a bit more risks, as Chris was referring to. So it's very familiar. We invest a lot of time in people. I would say even at this stage in my career, I still invest 20% of my work week investing in people. So people are our most important asset. We recognize that as a family-owned business, and we value the time. In fact, today, before this call, I spent 4.5 hours with my management team talking on high potentials and succession management, and really mapping out flight risks. And we talked about people for 4.5 hours.
Yeah, Sennheiser seems to be that way, my interactions with you guys. So Chris, how about you?
The culture at RFNU, we have a very team-based approach. It's not a large business. There aren't that many people. And so it still has that kind of entrepreneurial mindset. It's starting to become a lot more systems-based, which you have to do as you get bigger, or else things start breaking. So I think that we kind of have, we're at sort of that growth stage where we've exited, startup mode, where you're just kind of hustling all the time, into much more of a kind of predictable growth pattern, which requires the addition of people that have much more specialized expertise. I have absolutely no business running the accounting system anymore. I mean, none. We have people that have been doing that a very long time. Same thing in operations and logistics. You sort of have to realize the areas that you're good at, and then hire or bring in help where you need it. And so that's kind of created a really interesting shift in our culture, to where we have some really experienced managers taking on ever growing responsibilities in the business, but yet the roots are very much in staying super close to customers and identifying opportunities in the market and being very quick to react. Once a business reaches a certain size, the Sennheiser Shores, I mean, these are big companies, and they tend to need a much more deliberative process when they do things, whereas kind of middle and smaller companies, you can kind of just go, which is good and bad, but that's sort of, we're kind of in between those from a cultural standpoint.
Okay. And Steve, what about Audix? What's it like there?
Well, let's see. Once again, I can start with Greg as the example of the big microphone company and headphones and other sorts of things that Sennheiser is known for. We're also a microphone company, but we're on a much smaller scale. We are quite vertically integrated, so we actually make much of what you would buy, which is pretty exciting. I mean, I like that. I like making stuff. I like working for companies that make stuff. And actually make it themselves, and source. There's nothing against sourcing and all of that, and certainly we do plenty of sourcing of raw materials and components and things like that. But when I guess maybe it's probably my engineering background, as well as my my sort of product management background, that just enjoys when products are being made and being part of that. So that's something that we do here. That's actually something that sure did when I was there. And it's funny, Greg talks, and obviously Chris as well, talk about privately held companies or companies that are family owned or whatever. Yeah, same thing here. Family owned company, in the sense that it's a husband and wife and own it. There was another partner who's no longer actively part of it, or owner or whatever, but those are the roots. And it only goes back, not quite 40 years, but it's first generation in that regard. And that's one of the interesting things to think about, is when you look at opportunities, what is Greg's talking about succession planning, and that's more at the sort of the company, the general company level, but there's also succession planning in terms of the company itself, because these people do, and you see it a lot in the audio industry. I mean, Rupert Neve obviously just passed away. How many companies did he found along the way that, whether he wasn't even part of them anymore, but his name lived on in them? It's something you have to think about, because these companies are built on the shoulders of some pretty amazing people, but sometimes those people, they're all human, right? They're gonna pass on at some point. So where do you hitch your wagon? Do you worry about that, or do you just look at something as an opportunity to get experience and add some checks to your resume, so to speak? I mean, everything I've done, I can tell you the good and the bad about doing it. But there's I think that for me, that's part of the joy of working at different companies is also I've moved across the country and I've worked in a lot of other parts of the world as a result. You start to learn a lot more than we would if you just stayed in that one spot forever. I mean, Greg stayed in one spot from a company perspective, but my God, the places he's traveled, he hasn't. Yeah, so it's awesome. in that regard. That, and I've only been here since COVID time started, so this whole business about going out and being with customers and all that, haven't been able to do that so much. It's bumming me out. I mean, a lot of Zoom calls, but it's just not the same right now. We all want to get back to that place, but we've managed to get through it. I think the company is a little old school in the sense that I'm sitting in my office. Everybody else is sitting. Well, some in their office, some in their home office, but I sit in the office. And if I walked out the door right now, I'd put on a mask because that's what we're doing. And that's how we responded to the situation.
Okay. David, why don't you wrap this up with QSC?
So QSC is headquartered in Southern California, so Orange County, Southern California. So we kind of have I wouldn't say a surfy vibe, but the founder of the company does drive around with a surfboard on his panel van. And for 50 years now, the company's just a little over 50 years. That's been our base of operations. In the last decade, we've started to expand with offices in Boulder, Colorado, Hong Kong, India, big office in India, Germany. So it's, you want to make sure that the culture stays the same with regard to sort of ethics and everything, but you don't want to imprint a Southern California culture on some of these other locations because they've got their own cultures. So it's been a bit of a juggling act in the last decade, trying to bring those in and create sort of a global culture, so to speak. But yeah, it's like the others, it's a privately owned company. I have worked for a public company before, and it's not fun, especially when layoffs are on the table and trying to hit bottom line all the time. And so working for a private company is a lot less stressful, I have to say. Yeah, it's great.
Karen, you're muted.
Okay, now that everybody knows a little bit about you guys, let's move on to what kind of opportunities are there for students now. And so I'm particularly interested in, with COVID, are you guys still hiring? Are there positions available? And because we have a bunch of students that are graduating in the next couple of weeks. There are some in 2022, some in 2024, and hopefully by then everything will be back to whatever that normal is. But so why don't you talk about some of what's available and how maybe the hiring process has changed now because of COVID. So Chris, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think most of what we have available at the moment is at our headquarters on the engineering side. That's an area of growth for us. We have a growing sales and marketing function as well. In terms of how COVID has impacted everything, obviously it has severely impacted everything across all these companies. However, I'm an optimist by nature, and I think that on the other side of this, the demand for the skills that you're building in creative arts, engineering, production is going to explode. I think that the live events industry is going to see a demand like we've never experienced before. I think live sports and television broadcast, TV, film, there is a enormous amount of investment money on the sideline that is waiting for those projects to come around. So while I wouldn't say that our little company is necessarily hiring like gangbusters right now, there are definitely signs that within the next sort of 6 to 9 month time frame, things are going to start looking a lot different, and we're going to see a lot more economic activity and just an enormous amount of pent up demand. So in terms of our process for people that would be interviewing for a position in our headquarters, I don't know that it's changed too much. There's probably more remote screening up front involved rather than face-to-face interviews. But yeah, I'd probably turn it over to Greg for the kind of more systemic, trend in HR, because that's kind of the way that we've been, is just sort of filling needs as we go, rather than having a large kind of effort on the HR side.
Right. So Greg, have you hired anybody since everything got shut down? Can you talk about that process and just about job opportunities in general for Sennheiser?
Sure, but I want to actually take it a level higher and plug Pama here. One of the benefits that Pama offers to the community of pro audio is on our website. There's actually a link to all of the job openings from all of the member companies. So if you're looking for a position in the desired fields that you identified in the survey, and I'm hopeful that there it is, perfect. You just say it and it happens. All right. So I am independently wealthy right now. Stephanie, make it so. Didn't
Nope.
work. Anyway, so go to see that, because it's an aggregate of all of our companies' offers. We are still hiring, and actually, everybody's hiring. The question is, what is the position? Where's it located? Does it align with your skill sets? And it's different. I did something very different during COVID, and I still have a hard time saying it out loud, but I hired a global head of marketing who oversees a significant amount of money and a significant organization globally. I never met the person. I mean, it was all done like this. And I mean, if it weren't for me breaking the rules a little bit this past summer and pulling people together with masks to have a impromptu barbecue, whoever was local, I would never have even met the person still. And he just celebrated his 6-month anniversary last week. It's different. It's just different. There are opportunities, but what I would suggest, though, for students, similar to what you heard here from my colleagues on the panel, the key is just, you heard some of this before, but I want to actually expand it further. Get your foot in the door. Just get a job, right? It might not be your forever job, but it might be your forever company. Case in point, right? Get your foot in the door and then test the culture. Maybe you're going to like a fast-paced entrepreneurial vibe like RF Venue. Maybe you're going to just despise a 4.5 hour long meeting talking about succession management for executives. Find what fits you and you as an authentic person. And then you could start juggling opportunities, but you're not going to have the chance to even experience that unless you get your foot in the door. So expand your network, talk to anyone who's willing to listen to you, do what you say you're going to do, respond to inquiries, respond to LinkedIn requests, and just get, let yourself out there, and no one's going to be able to read your mind if you're interested. And I see some of these comments, that I'm interested in doing this in that city or that position, or I'm passionate. No one's going to know that unless you say it out loud. And so congratulations for those who are saying it out loud here. But you know what? The task is now to say it out loud to the entire industry. Let everyone know what you're interested in. Once upon a time, I remember I was, I don't know, probably 8 years in the company, and I met a new vice president, and he came in to introduce himself. He said, "Hey, my name is John, and I'm the vice president, blah, blah, blah. And who are you?" I'm like, I'm Greg. He's like, "Oh, great. What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm a product manager." "What do you want to do in your next 5 years?" I'm like, "I'd like to be talking about transitioning into your job." Right. So from the beginning, I'm like, I want to be the president of this company. And I just told as many people who are willing to listen, because they can't read my mind. No one can read anybody's mind. So there are jobs. Talk to as many people that are willing to listen to you, and let people know what you're interested in doing.
Greg, on that line, there's a question. How do your companies address candidates without the preferred qualifications for posted jobs or opportunities? And I'll just throw that out to any of you.
Yeah, I'll give someone else a chance to speak, but if you like, I can add some color to that as well.
Okay, why don't we just get some color, and then I'm going to go to David after that.
All right. So it really depends, right? So the head of marketing that we just hired actually is a degreed engineer, but had proven marketing chops and learned the field of marketing at a major company in our industry. So they had on the job experience marketing and got certificates and such. So there's no formal degree in marketing per se, but he had proven through his effort. So the qualifications on paper are generally, I tell people, they're guidelines. It's as much about, at least in the world of Sennheiser, it's a much about the person, the behaviors, the attitude, as well as the willingness to do the job. And again, it depends on the level of the position, right? We're not going to hire, no offense, someone fresh out of school to run a significant marketing budget on a global scale, but you're not going to even have the opportunity to consider that unless you talk. Let people know what you're interested in. Let them know how you're going to actually be able to make it happen.
Right.
Just to tag on to that. So both the job I got at JBL and the job I got at QSC, if you looked at the job description, it called out for someone with a business degree, which I did not have. So, but I did have a lot of experience, QBE, qualified by experience. Plus I knew people within the company that could speak on my behalf. So knowing people, building relationships, getting a foot in the door, it's really important because yes. Now I will temper that by saying that if the requirements or the qualifications required have to do with engineering, software engineering, hardware engineering, that's very different. Those requirements are very fast and hard. But when it comes to things that are a little bit more ambiguous, like sales and marketing, you can absolutely go in with some experience and use that in your favor.
Okay. So a couple of you have talked about networking and how important that is to expand your network and mentoring. So a lot of these students are fresh out of college. So do you have suggestions on how they start that? How do they start their networking? Where do they go? Who do they talk to? And it's hard now too with everything virtual.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm old, all right? So social media doesn't come natural, right? But LinkedIn resonates. I get questions from people on LinkedIn, students. I actually got a question from a panel, a student asking me, the benefits of recording in mono and actually going stereo in post-production. I'm like, what the hell if I know? I mean, but I know somebody who does know, and so I connected them to a studio person that I know. But I answer all of the inquiries I get on LinkedIn, and I can't say everybody will do that, but it's a great community of audio professionals on LinkedIn, and you're going to get responses, generally speaking. So that's probably the most important place to build up some visibility on who you are, what you've done, and what you're interested in.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think that the relationships piece in business is very important. I mean, Pam is a great example of that. We should have a great group of people that really care about each other. And if I needed something from Greg or Greg needed help from me, I would drop everything I was doing to do it. No offense, Steve and David, same extended to you as well. But if you think about who you know that might know someone at a company you're interested in, make yourself available and say, I'm interested in learning more about this company. Do you think you could connect me to someone there? Even if there's no jobs listed, because a lot of opportunities haven't even been created yet, because you may well create it yourself. So really think about how to get introduced somewhere instead of just hammering job boards, because there's all sorts of pressure to those job boards and those job listings sites that are out there. But if you can get coffee with someone that's sort of a mutual contact, you'd be amazed at how willing they are to help you out, where even if there isn't something at their company, they would say, boy, you seem to have a lot of interest in this area. I know this other person. And it's something that I've practiced my entire career, is the meeting to get the next meeting. Mm-hmm. Is what it's all about, because you're not likely to walk in the door and land a job. But you can start a conversation, you can start to build a relationship. And that's regardless of whether you're working with a movie studio or a speaker manufacturer, whatever it is, that is sort of universal in the career world. So I'd highly recommend, if you have a short list of things that you're interested in, think about who might be able to connect you in there, and really start there, even if you're looking at their job board and your dream job isn't there, or they're not hiring right now, or whatever it is, because that can be a real foundation to build on to get you where you want to go.
Okay.
I think
And,
as Greg said, I mean, though, it's really important if you get these introductions, if you get these connections, you got to follow through on them. Because if
Right.
you don't, you're not going to get it next time. So cast a wide net, but beware when you do that, I mean, you probably get a lot of opportunities that come from that. And you got to follow up on all of them. Because if you don't, it's just like when the band leader calls up and says, I need a saxophone. Can you do it this weekend? You say no, he'll never call you again because he doesn't need to. He'll find somebody else next time. Same thing here. You gotta follow through on it. I was thinking a little bit about this whole the COVID thing is I'll turn it around and think about like I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s or something like that, when the economy was such that there were a lot of people coming out overqualified, so to speak, really nice. And I don't mean overqualified in the sense of audio engineering overqualified, but let's say overqualified in terms of what they would normally expect to do at a company. And literally they were joining companies. And I'm thinking about this specifically at Shure, because that's where I was in the early 90s. We had a young crop of people that came there only because, frankly, there were no other good jobs that they could land at that time. And they thought, well, I like audio, I like music. Let me do this thing. And they ended up being like in customer service, answering the phone, making phone calls, doing whatever it says. Some of those people went on to be some amazing people, both at Shure and beyond, who have, one of them was a Pama member who recently is no longer here. And his starting point was not anything very august. It was like the lowest levels in Shure. And he just, unfortunately, like I say, he just passed away, and too young, by the way. But he ended up a VP, but more importantly, he ended up being loved by everybody in the industry. My God, Mark Bruner, look it up, Google it, check him out. He was an amazing cat. And that's really important. He was the kind of guy who his network was just massive, but he didn't start that way. He just started and then he just always followed through. And so I would really encourage that in this time. If you're gonna play the network game, and I agree that you have to, and it's not really a game. I say that in a sort of a negative sense, but I mean, for me as an introvert, it's hard to do. I don't like networking; doesn't come easily. But what you do whenever you get a contact from somebody, you need to let that person know, thank you. I will follow up on it, and then you in fact have to follow up on it. And if you do that, you'll be amazed at how things will work out.
yeah. I've done a lot of panels with and networking events throughout the country in pro audio, and worked with a lot of engineers, producers, manufacturers. Their bottom line for everything is you have to show up.
Yep.
So if you're here but you don't follow up with any of these panelists, you're not showing up. If you're not, you need to show up, and that's like bottom line for all of this. So that's my 2 cents about it. What about mentoring? What if some of these students are looking for a mentor or some guidance? Because Chris, I think you brought that up. So how do they find that now?
I mean, I think it might be related to the broader networking question we were just kicking around. If you're looking for advice or you're looking for, mentorship, whatever that may look like for your, field or position of choice, see if you can locate that person and get an introduction, and see where the relationship goes. And I think just be open to a range of possibilities that may have you shifting laterally from one thing to another, where it's definitely been the case in startups that I've done, and in new product development, where you say, all right, we're going to start this company, we're going to build this whole thing, we're going to sell products A, B, and C, and then you start going like this, and you start zigzagging until you get to your ultimate goal, which was fundamentally different from where you started. So I think that sort of process plays out a lot in your early career. And so I think finding a mentor that can maybe help you, navigate some of those choices, or develop some of those opportunities, is the way to go. But yeah, I think it comes back to the networking piece.
Okay. Now, a lot of the students who are about to graduate, we're talking about looking for internships. do you all have internships available right now? Greg, does Sennheiser have internships available?
Yes, but most of them are in Germany. So if you're fluent in German, please reach out to me. Yes, we have internships, but I want to maybe build a bridge between what we were just talking about with networking and mentorships and internships. It's also the process of listening, right? So let's just say, I mean, based on what I read, a lot of the people on this call are in the United States. Fine, I'm an American, great, no problem. And let's just say that you're interested in getting a job at Harman, right? Big company in our industry. You know, no one on this panel is from Harman, but if you listened, you might have heard David say he had a job at JBL, right? You would need to be able to correlate JBL is owned by Harman. So if you wanted to learn about opportunities in Harman, you can maybe view David as a mentor temporarily, reach out to him. Hey, David, I was on the panel that Karen organized. I understand you were at JBL for a little bit. Do you know anyone in there that can maybe help navigate the waters for me about a potential internship? That's how to play it.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Anybody else have anything to go with that?
Yeah, so good question on internship. We do have a couple of internships. They tend to be either in our Orange County location, so you have to be here, or our Boulder location in Colorado. And obviously they're usually short term, but it's such a wonderful foot in the door because you get to meet people, you get to find out, you know, build that network that we keep talking about over and over again. Once you get a couple of people in that network, it just opens up a huge opportunity for us, or for you, sorry. So yeah, we do have internships. We've got a lot of skilled positions open right now. And by skilled positions, I'm talking about, you know, software engineers, digital hardware engineers. Those are the positions that are highly sought after and very hard to find people, I might add. The types of positions we don't have at the moment are more of the administrative type roles that you would normally expect, but just during this sort of pandemic phase, those are less important because people can wear two hats and cover those areas. But certainly those skilled areas, you know, C++, HTML5, those sort of engineers are in really high demand, especially if they're willing to move to California or Boulder.
Okay. How about you, Steve?
Little company, we don't have anything specifically. But actually, I mean, we did hire, we have an intern presently for our graphics group in marketing, and he's a musician. I mean, that's the other thing you'll sort of find is that a lot of people that I've met at all these companies I've talked about earlier, they're all musicians. I mean, I had somebody that went to Full Sail who worked for me when I was at Community. He headed up the applications group, and he had worked, I think after that, he worked at Claire Brothers and a few other things, but he found his way there. But my point is, you know, there are certainly opportunities in the greater world. They're not going to be here. I mean, we don't have something specifically right now. Like I said, we have this graphics person who's here now, and we might bring him on full time, but you know, we don't have those kind of needs. If I would just drop a couple other audio companies that possibly might, I don't know, up in Minnesota, up in the Twin Cities, Bosch, which owns EV, the EV brand, being a bigger corporation, they tend to do the intern thing quite nicely. Because when I was there, I worked there as well. We had some interns come and go, both on the engineering side as well as on the product management side. So that's another kind of company that's good. I mean, typically the bigger companies are a little bit more mature in how they do this. The smaller companies, like what I work in right now, it's sort of like June comes along. Oh crap, we probably should have talked about doing an intern. Oh well, they're all gone, whatever. So sometimes your best thing to do is just reach out. If there's something that's interesting to you, just send notes to these people. Send a note. I mean, send a note to info@audixusa.com. I mean, or just go online. You never know. The HR person might be totally, you know, looking or thinking they should have done something, but they never got around to it. And they find out, like in our case, like Greg was saying, like in our case, that person happens to be in Portland, which is where we're at. score. That's really good because, that it's really easy to do a 3-month thing with somebody who's in the city. It's really painful to do it when it's somebody who isn't in the city, because then they have to move and all that kind of stuff. So, just look at what's out there. You'd be surprised. Also in the Portland area, you got Audinate. I mean, they're not a PAMA member, but they got Dante people. And interesting, not knowing the backgrounds of all the folks on the call here. Dave was talking about all the C++ stuff and all that, but you know what? If you do have those kind of hard skills that David was talking about before, and you also have, I'll call them soft skills, but the creative side that hopefully is cultivated in the community that you're at Full Sail, man, that's pretty golden stuff in the audio world. That's really, I mean, for the manufacturing world, if you have the education, you have the engineering education, the computer science education, the IT background, and you're also creative, or you know how to talk to the creative side, you know how to talk to creatives, how to put it all together. Now that's a pretty exciting combination. And that can lead into product management opportunities really nicely, because that's kind of that juxtaposition between the engineering and sales kind of thing, envisioning the products of the future, et cetera, working for good folks like David there. That would be my recommendation, is just, if you know where you're at, just see who's out there. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of, Audix, we're so small that so many people in our area don't know that we're here, and yet we're known around the world. Go figure, shame on us. But that's a reality. You might be surprised where you're living that there's some really amazing opportunities there. As Greg mentioned earlier, they won't know that you're out there unless you let them know that you're there and you're interested.
Hey, Steve, let me just jump on this for a moment, because I realized I should have said this earlier. This morning when we were talking about some of our high potentials, I make a rule that it can't be more than 5% of our total personnel, because if everybody's high potential, then nobody's high potential. So we came up with a number, and one of them actually is a Full Sail graduate, coincidentally. So, I mean, Full Sail comes with some really good pedigree. I would imagine there are Full Sail graduates in every pro audio company in the industry. Reach out to your former student body, to the faculty perhaps, or perhaps there's and LinkedIn is really good with this, by the way. You can actually see if a company has people from your alma mater. But I think that there's some great opportunity to capitalize on the pull, frankly, in the reputation of Full Sail to help you as well.
I'd give a shout out to Mark Johnson at Full Sail, because I know Mark really well from his Myers Sound days. He and I spent many evenings at the Montreux Jazz Festival together when I was working at Shure and he's working at Myers Sound. And he's connected. He knows manufacturers. He knows our world.
Yep.
And he's been a little bit disconnected from it, so to speak, because he's been with Full Sail now for a number of years. But you'd be surprised that I think the thing that was most fun when we would have our PAMA meetings, just for anybody to know, like once a year we have a retreat, a PAMA retreat, and we get together and we have speakers and all that stuff. But more importantly, at the end of the night, we all get together for beers in the bar and just talk about things. And we talk about the things that we've done, the people we've met, and the connections we've made. It's just so cool. For me, that was kind of a little bit of the brainchild of the impetus, or whatever you want to say, behind why we even have a conversation like this. Because we all felt like, God, people didn't know how cool it is. I mean, cool sounds really dorky, but to be working for a manufacturer, because the things you do, I mean, my God, dream of your most favorite, like what's the one recording studio that you've always dreamed of going into? There's a good chance you'll never get there, but you know what? You might, through the manufacturing angle. I mean, if you just think linearly, like I'm going to do this thing and one day I'm going to be working in Abbey Road and whatever, I'm sorry, it just might not happen. We can dream these things and that's great. I love it. But I've known plenty of people who have been in that building, who know people, again, talking about Mark Bruner earlier, the places that guy went, the people he met, And then, I got to by association. I got to meet so many of my idols because I knew Mark, because Mark was that guy. You want to know who, he could tell you stories about hanging out with Eddie Kramer. I mean, who has those stories? People in manufacturing, they do. I mean, you wouldn't think so. You'd think you could only get there and do that stuff through that other what I'll call creative side of things, but manufacturing side, man, there's, and the other thing I can just throw as a bit of a pitch for the manufacturing side of things is, we used to say, and I don't know if this is fair, but music is a great advocation, but not always a great vocation. What's meant by that is, it's great, it's fun, but to make a living doing music, whatever that means, can be a challenge. But talk about a great 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 job, which is what I think a lot of what we're talking about right now, that gives you your evenings and your weekends to do whatever and leverage some of those experiences that you're making, some of those connections that you're making along the way. Another guy that was one of those high potentials, as Greg talked about him, but who came in at the bottom level. He started a company called Sound Devices. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that product line, but he and another engineer from Shure, they left and started Sound Devices up in Wisconsin. And they never would have been able to do that had he not found his way. I mean, he wasn't even an audio guy per se, but he came into the company and made a connection with the production side of things and field production. And he was managing the Shure mixers at that time, and kind of could tell that Shure wasn't really serious about wanting to continue down that path. And there's another engineer that he knew from Shure, and he said, let's basically start our own company. His uncle had a barn. No, he had a factory of some sort. They could lease out a little part in the back of it, and they started a company. And it's amazing stuff that happens. And now this guy, the field production people that he knows worldwide, it's just incredible. So yeah.
I'll jump in on that because there was a question in the Q&A about how do I find a mentor, and Steve just sort of touched on the fact that you can have informal and formal mentors. So informal mentors are just people who you respect in the industry and you're able to pick their brain. And a good example of that, when I worked at JBL, there was a consultant that would come in once a month. His name was John Ergel, and John Ergel wrote the Sound Reinforcement Handbook. So if you Google the name John Ergel, he's a Grammy Award winner, super brainy guy, really humble, passed away probably about a decade ago. But whenever he was in the office and I saw him go into the cafeteria, I would dash into the cafeteria and pick his brain because he was just such a wealth of knowledge. That's an informal mentorship. As far as more formalized mentorships, it's up to you to instigate that. Find someone who you really respect. In my case, it was a guy called Gene Jolly, who was an executive VP at Guitar Center. He came to work for QSC. And I just set up a monthly time with him where I could sit with him, tell him, what was going on in my world, get him to advise me. Just a wonderful, wonderful person. So you have to take the initiative sometimes, whether it's running into the cafeteria or whether it's actually going up to someone who you really respect and asking for, an hour out of their time once a month. But it will pay dividends.
It has to be a two-way thing, right, David? Yeah. I mean, it's usually, you hear a lot about reverse mentoring and really the whole idea there. You guys are learning stuff now. I mean, you're digital savvy, your other sorts of things that just come from when you came up in the business, so to speak. Your skill set is different maybe than that, say, that 60-year-old person, whatever and so that 60-year-old person can learn from you. And you don't go and tell them like, hey, you're gonna learn from me, but you create this sort of genuine, this authentic dialogue with this person, and you don't just take, you give. And that's when it's really magical, when you've got somebody. I mean, I'm sure when Mark Bruner was talking to Eddie Kramer, you sit there and listen to stories all day about whatever, like Electric Ladyland and Hendrix and all that, and that's great. But I mean, I'm sure Eddie didn't just want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about today. He wanted to know what Mark was doing. And so Mark was doing some new things that he maybe hadn't done, and it created this. And I'm not sure that that's strictly a mentor relationship there by any stretch. But again, frankly, I don't even know where the line is, the pure definition. It's just like relationships. People, But my whole point here is it's got to be two-way. It's got to be something where you give to them, they give to you. And if it works like that, then it'll keep going. And it won't, I'm sure I know Gene quite well, and I'm sure Gene was looking forward to that monthly sit down with David because, David's a fascinating guy. You heard his background and he's passionate about what he does. And sometimes some of us get a little, tired as we go through our career and kind of go, counting the days until retirement or whatever. And when you see somebody younger come in who has that spark in her eye and she's like excited about something, you go, wow, that's it. That's why I do this. I mean, that's one of the things I always, when I would first meet, like do a distributor meeting, which, like in the case of this was specifically a community, but, when first time I'd meet all the international distributors, like at a distributor meeting, I would say, everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you always your whole life wanted to be a distributor of audio products. And of course, no hands ever went up, unless maybe there's somebody whose daddy owned the distributor company and, he took it over, she took it over, whatever, but no hands ever went up. So then I kind of, I just played along and say, okay, so who in this audience plays an instrument? See a lot of hands go up. Keep them up. Who in this audience has done live sound or recording? You kind of do this, and pretty soon you see all the hands are up. And the reason the hands are all up, not because they wanted to distribute professional audio products. That wasn't their dream. Their dream and their passion was about music, was about connecting, about creativity and sharing. And this was a vehicle that allowed them to do that. They could make money, they could put food on the table, and yet most of these people were still performing. They're still playing, or they had fond memories of it or something at least. So, that's where I think the mentoring thing is really exciting, is because, man, you give energy back to people who've been kind of doing the business side of things for too long, and they lose sight of why are they here? I mean, my God, I just joined a new company. One of the coolest things about being here was when I walked into the performance room, we have a whole stage, we have a grand piano, we have all this stuff. I mean, you can go in anytime you want to and play, but you know what? Nobody really does. It's like, well, why not? Well, whatever. And so we're building it back up. And of course, it's COVID, so we're not supposed to sit up there and yell and scream and sing, but we're building it back up. And you can see the energy comes with that, because I'm brought in some new people with me.
Yeah.
Who looked at this.
So all good points. I want to go back a little bit though to, we were talking about creatives and their roles in your different companies. And Joseph actually talks about this in the chat. He graduates in 7 months for audio production, and he was hoping to go work in a studio, and found out that most studios, you need to have 4 or more years of work, right? So he doesn't know, his goals now, he doesn't know what to do. So he's never thought about a career in anything other than, being a musician or, that type. So what do you guys want creatives, right? They are actually a benefit for your company. So why don't you talk about that a little bit and just let them, what are some options, and why do you like having creatives in there, and the audio engineers and the musicians? What do they add to your companies?
I'll just chime in here and say that we as a manufacturer, Sennheiser, are only as good as the solution we produce. And it makes no sense for us to spend millions of euros on developing a product no one wants. A way to minimize the risk is to make certain that we're creating a product that is actually wanted. And so part of the way that I do that is I make certain that we hire customers when we have that opportunity. So, if I look at our digital wireless system, we don't have German engineers in a dark basement somewhere who have been there for 50 years just doing this. We hired touring sound engineers to product manage that product. So and again, I remember, I'll never forget this because it's so obvious. Really, the first job this person had in corporate life, who's been touring for 25 years, his task was to build this digital wireless system, and he really was like, "Can I do everything? Can I do it?" I'm like, "Whatever you need to do, you do it. Make this for you." And he came to me, and I will never forget. And he showed me the back of it, and he's like, "Greg, I made the font larger on the back because it's dark on stage, and my eyes are tired and old. And if the font was bigger, I'll know what the inputs and outputs are." And I'm like, Genius. Why wouldn't we wouldn't have never thought of making the font larger. But it took getting the person who lived in the life of our customer, the creative type, to actually do something as simple as saying, hey, I need to make the font larger on the back of the chassis because it's dark on the stage. And I can give multiple examples here. Creative types are critical to the success of the solutions that we provide, whether it's their hardware or software.
Okay. Anybody else want to talk about that?
Yeah, I can jump in. So one of my favorite people that I work with is a guy called Brad. He used to work at Presonus in New Orleans. Did I say that correct? New Orleans. And then, okay, it's my funny accent. So he now lives here in California, and he's in charge of artist relations and social media. He does a prolific amount of work. He deals with all of these musicians and bands and places like Jam in the Van, and he's coordinating things with them all the time, whether it's a video shoot or a recording that he can then post to YouTube, or they're submitting all of their content and he's posting that onto Facebook and Twitter and everything. And it's a prolific amount of work. He's super creative and he's working with very creative people all the time. But to create our sort of brand awareness through social media, it's the single most critical role we have in the company. And I just love the work that he does, and I love the people that he gets to deal with, because he's, even though we have a couple of sort of A-list artists that are signed up with us, people like Omar Hakim and Dave Weckel, the majority of people that are signed up with us are just sort of small, local, indie type artists. And they're very awesome, and they do some great content for us. And it creates more of a groundswell of a customer base, rather than, in your face, here's, this famous person like Eddie Van Halen or somebody like that. It's a very different approach, but I really, really appreciate all of the creativity that goes into his role.
The content piece that David mentions is huge. It's a big deal for small companies like us, or even big companies as well. Now that the business relationship has changed dramatically between manufacturers and customers, where you have such a close direct link to your customers, one of the most valuable things you can do is to tell their story. And sure, it's going to have some kind of implication with maybe a product or a technique with a product or something like that. But the most effective content really tells an interesting story that people want to connect with, and isn't necessarily, a promotional marketing, banner ad or something like that has, 20% off blinking lights or anything. It's really about developing quality content. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort to put together. And early on at RF Venue, we worked with I brought in some folks that had photography backgrounds. Anything about wireless spectrum or antennas, or it's just totally all learned from a technical standpoint. But they were extremely effective at connecting with customers, interviewing, transcribing, crafting stories, both from a writing standpoint, but also from an audio and visual standpoint. And that might be a really interesting sort of angle to think about earlier on in your career, because if you can come in and connect those pieces together, that's an area that a lot of established companies struggle with, because it's hard to point directly towards the effort in to the dollar return in a lot of cases. But if you commit to it and you have people that are really talented and passionate about learning things and writing them down or shooting videos or interviews, it really compounds over time, and it is become of strategic importance for companies in AV. And it's a never-ending battle too, to feed that monster for content, for social media, for case studies. A project comes in from halfway around the world that is just super interesting, how do we run that down and capture it and coordinate it and make it into something that's really compelling that our customers or partners in the industry could use. So I'm glad that we kind of landed on that, because especially in my company, but I know it's across all brands, that kind of content has traditionally fallen under like a marketing role. But it's kind of morphed now, where it's like it's everybody's responsibility to identify those opportunities, to tell those stories, and then people that have the creativity to capture and tell them.
Great. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
We have our social media, small company again, our social media, we don't have somebody here who that's their title job. We actually work with a couple of ladies out of Germany, of all places, who are Americans who happen to be living in Germany, and they kind of lead a lot of the social marketing side of things. We direct it, we tell them what to do, so et cetera. But the reason I'm mentioning this is they're in a band and they're creatives, and if we need something done, wow, they can, they have connections, they can pull a video together, get somebody to do something, and it's really important for us that we have somebody who can take it, either do it themselves or find somebody who can through their network. The other thing I was just going to mention real quickly, we're talking a lot about the creative side of the audio world, but live sound is also, there's something about doing live sound and surviving, and delivering under pressure. And what you learn that is also a very useful skill in the business world, or frankly anywhere. The ability to know when showtime's coming and making sure everything is planned for, ready to happen at the right time, and if things go off a little bit crooked at a time, you can recover. Those kind of skills are things that will serve you well throughout your life, and are really things that you talk about. What can you talk about when you're talking to a manufacturer about what you do or whatever, trying to get the door open or whatever. I mean, those sort of things we're all fascinated by. The time that you're ready to go on, and then something happened and you're able to save the day. That may not sound like something a typical like an answer to a typical interview type question about tell me the time that you experienced or whatever. But tap into your own life. If you've done any live sound or any production related things, I guarantee you've had some pretty interesting experiences, and probably things that not only demonstrate that you're able to think fast on your feet, but also it's a more compelling story for the listener, because frankly, they're probably really interested in that side of things, because it's probably more fun, whatever you're talking about, whether it's doing like in Chris's world, something for the Super Bowl or whatever, with wireless, but something like that. Those make for really great stories for the interview. And as somebody who's been on the other side of the interviews a lot of times, I'm much happier when somebody has an exciting story that taps into something beyond just kind of the typical mundane businessy stuff.
Great. So that might lead us into our last topic about the interview, unless you guys have something you want to wrap up with the creative working with.
Maybe I could, once again, try to build a bridge. I think you heard it from all of us, maybe in different ways. The creative side, of course, from the digital perspective, whether we talk about hardware or software or even social media, you're better at it than we are. Just accept that you're better at it than we are. We had to learn it after we were old. You're like, you're native. Now, Chris might be the exception. I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to insult you. You're really good at it. And at least from my perspective, overseeing marketing as well, one of my big beefs is, we do all these great things. And I ask our marketing people, or social media people in particular, why does it take hours after an event to actually post our affiliation? Most recently, the inauguration, that was a brand new microphone we made, just launched, and already it was colored gold for Lady Gaga. I'm like, it was hours after the event before that got posted. Or, this sounds like a plug. I'm not really plugging. The weekend at the Super Bowl. I mean, that's our stuff. We should be proud and talk about it. But too much time passes before it actually goes out into the internet. And for people who are a bit more digitally native, being able to go in and have that conversation with someone and say, hey, I noticed that there's a lag in your postings or in your reference materials. And one of the things I can guarantee you is I could be better. I'm faster and I can prove it. And here's some examples. I'll tell you what, you'll get my attention.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So let's switch to the interview process. So, but now that we're in COVID times, everything's virtual, almost everything's virtual. So how things change and what should they expect in their initial interview, and how does a video interview change the process? And we start with Chris.
How does a video interview change the process? You know, we have a number of positions at the company that are remote. So you know, they're primarily sales marketing roles. So I think that it may be smart to think backwards from what the role is. For example, if we're hiring someone to you know, work on our marketing team or our sales team, and they're going to be based in, you know, LA, and we're outside of Boston, you know, how that video call and that interaction goes with that remote connection is going to be really indicative of how well the communication skills are going to be going forward in the position. So, you know, communication and good writing skills are really the two primary things that I, you know, rank very highly if we're interviewing. So I always sort of look at it like the video versus the in-person is not a huge switch if it's a remote role. If it's a, you know, in the engineering department, you know, sort of meetings and a lot of you know, technical documentation discussions and that kind of thing, where you've got a real big group that's sort of, you know, problem solving in real time. I think that it's a lot more challenging, but I think it partially depends on the role. I think there's more and more remote work that is out there now, so the ability to, you know, clearly communicate, stay engaged, be positive, be smiling, act like you want to be in the meeting. You know, those are all important things when you're on video calls. And it sure, and you know, this recent period sure has leveled everybody up, I gotta say.
Okay. Greg, do you have any suggestions or input on this?
Building on what Chris said, the video camera, yes, it matters. And this is all about setting yourself up to be noticed, to be different. And I'm not going to call her out, but just in our call right now, someone on this panel discussion, one of the students reached out already by LinkedIn and connected, right? Stand out, right? That gets noticed, stand out. So the video call, you know what? We're all casual right now because we're kind of used to wearing sweatpants. I'm not wearing sweatpants, but but when you're doing the video call, dress up. Put on the nice blouse or the jacket and tie. You know, try to set yourself apart, and moreover than how you look, make certain you've got the technology right. Make sure that you got good audio, you got a good video, and come prepared. You know, the worst thing you could do is just come and ask, tell me about the job, tell me about the company.
Yeah, never wing it.
No. Be specific, do your research, and not just on the company, not just on the job, but you want to be different. Find out whom you're interviewing with. The internet's an amazing thing. You could do research on the people that you're going to be interviewing with. Ask them specific questions. So I understand, David, you used to work at Harman in the JBL business unit. What was the most exciting thing you got to do there? Right? You do that. In interviews, you're going to actually have different interviewee types, right? You're going to have somebody who's the hiring manager. You're going to have somebody who's going to potentially be a mentor. You're going to have subordinates, perhaps peers. Do your reconnaissance. The better prepared you could be, particularly in this virtual sense, is going to elevate you from everyone else.
There's a segment in a lot of interviews. I learned this early on when I was interviewing around a lot of different places, where it's usually at the end of the interview, and the person that's asking you the question says, "Do you have any questions for me?"
Yep, every time.
That's where the interview really kind of gets interesting, because if the answer is no, thank you very much for your time, you miss an opportunity to really engage with the person and say, I was looking over your product line, or I noticed that, you guys are, a lot of your social media has been focused on this. Like, tell me about, is that an area that's important for the company? Yeah. I worked on a project at Full Sail where et cetera, et cetera. So that part of it shouldn't be overlooked. That's a really good opportunity when you are given the floor to sort of turn the tables a little bit and really, like Greg said, stand out.
You stole my thunder, Chris, because I was going to same feedback. Be prepared for that question. The other thing that always gets thrown at you is, there's some sort of boilerplate questions that a lot of people ask, like, tell me about the biggest mistake you ever made. So just be prepared for some of those questions that might catch you off. Absolutely research the company you're interviewing for. So know all about it, and know about the role as well. I've had people apply for positions, but they didn't quite understand the role. They thought it was something else, and they didn't get very far. In fact, the other thing is, a lot of times HR might filter the applicants. So there might be 20 applicants, but only half a dozen of them go through to the hiring manager. So make sure that you impress enough that you get through that gatekeeper.
I know a manufacturer who her whole point is, you don't go into a job interview and ask what they can do for you. You go in telling them what you can do for them.
Yep.
You're there to fill a need for them.
Yeah. I think confidence is really important, but don't mistake it. Don't let it go into arrogance. Arrogance, you can pick up on that very, very quickly.
Even
I've had people in an interview where I could feel that they were quite arrogant and it wasn't overconfidence, it was clearly arrogance, and they didn't get hired. So
something I've noticed in the responses, it didn't feel like things are that different looking in the present or looking forward because of COVID necessarily. I mean, the responses, I don't think 2 years ago the responses would have been vastly different in terms of how to present yourself and prepare and all that. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but that's what I noticed. I do think that, with COVID and because of COVID, not necessarily because of COVID, but having lived through this, we are now much more comfortable with Zoom as an option or whatever the thing is. And that's, I interviewed, when I interviewed for Bosch, I interviewed with a managing director in Germany, and I went to I didn't even do it from my house. I went to, I don't know, it was like a place that had conference rooms, and I sat there and they set it all up, and it was this is like 8 years ago, but it's like 10 lifetimes ago, it feels like now, because he didn't do that from your computer, and they didn't even envision that you would do that from your computer. You would go somewhere and you would sit there and you would have this interview with this guy in Germany. So that's what I did. Now, obviously, we've all gone through the drill. We all know how to do this. And so there might be a few things in addition to your clothing and all that work to your advantage with, or to think about, but in this case, work to your advantage on a Zoom call, is that some of that preparation that you have can be on a piece of paper in front of you. You can have all this here. When you're in person for that first interview, nobody wants to see you. I mean, it's nice if you have some notes, but you don't want to have like a script in front of you, because you think, well, who is this person? They have, but you can prepare, man. You can have all of this. And I would say, if they give you the option between doing a Zoom call or a phone call, take the Zoom call if you can, because you're going to make much more of a lasting impression, hopefully good. But either way, when they meet you in person, That's going to go one of two ways, I suppose. Then, so you might as well get that over with, and hopefully, again, you present yourself well, and you make more of an impact. And if the one person was just on the phone or another person on Zoom, I think that the nod's going to go to the person that said that maybe the exact same things and had the same background, but presented themselves, that extra level of themselves, and said, oh, okay, well, I guess, they get through the filter a little bit better because I can see that they look serious or they dressed up or whatever the case might be. So any other thoughts about that, guys? 'Cause I'm just sort of wondering, is there anything else about this COVID time that really makes our answers different?
I think there is a certain Zoom etiquette that people haven't quite mastered yet. Don't look down at your phone during a meeting. Some people have the camera here, but they've got their screen there, so they're always looking up to the side. That's not good etiquette. Make sure your camera is always sort of positioned near your screen. Don't have cardboard boxes behind you. And Karen's laughing because she made me move the cardboard boxes just before. But just very, very common sense things that you sometimes forget about.
One thing that I sort of wish that I had done when I was in interviews, where I didn't have any relevant job experience, is to have like a running list of projects that you've worked on while you're at school. I don't know why I never wrote all that down, because I did all sorts of cool stuff, and you guys have done all sorts of interesting things and had dynamics between teams you've had to figure out for team-based stuff or projects. Have that readily accessible so that when someone's asking you a question about, hey, how would you approach this scenario, or what would your thoughts be on this topic, you can go, it's interesting. It might not be the exact same, but I once worked on this project where I was, leading the team, recording whatever, or, if you can kind of insert that story and have those, kind of front of mind when you're interviewing, it's super helpful, and it makes the person interviewing you really kind of connect and listen, versus sort of vague, just throwing business speak around, which, a lot of candidates do, and anybody can do that. So, just kind of document what you've done, what you're proud of, beyond just what maybe a typical resume might be, because you never know where it might fit into a conversation and help you.
It's a great idea.
Especially those sort of stories where you've solved a problem, where you've overcome something, whether it's a conflict with a colleague, or whether it's, the question I asked you, I mentioned earlier about what's the biggest mistake you've ever made and how did you rectify that? Just having those stories in your back pocket and being able to apply it to some of those boilerplate questions, because they will come up, believe me.
Absolutely. And I love how you're saying this, David. It's about being vulnerable, right? None of us are perfect. I really try to make it a practice to say it at least once a day, that I make mistakes every day. I try to let everyone know that no one's perfect. And so in the interview process, if you're trying to help set yourself apart, not to your detriment, but talk about the things that you're not good at. It's okay. It really is okay, because as Chris said, he's kind of done with the accounting piece. That's why they make CFOs, right? I once upon a time went into my boss and said, hey, I got accepted to law school. I finished my MBA and now I'm ready to get a Juris Doctorate. And he laughed at me. And I'm like, why are you laughing? He's like, well, that's why we have lawyers. You don't need to do that, right? So be vulnerable. It's okay.
More good advice. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this part up and just open it for Q&A. Do you guys have any final advice before we go to the Q&A? Okay, well, let's start then. And I'll just throw it out to all of you. You guys just decide who wants to answer it. So Yancey wants to know, do you believe that there will be career opportunities in the New York area for an audio engineering student? A lot of my engineering friends have been moving to Atlanta because there's a big market, but that move isn't possible for me. Do you have any tips or suggestions? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll take it because I think I'm closest, right? By geography.
Yeah.
Sure.
So my advice really would be to do some of the things you heard here, honestly, network and you know, an audio engineer can do a lot of things, right? So you can do audio engineering. You can actually help with training videos. You can actually help with product development, with beta testings. I mean, there's a variety of things you could do, but you're not going to know what those things are until you let people know, hey, I'm an audio engineer in New York. Can you help me identify a path? Let people know. It's a good start. You're putting it out here, but this is just the beginning.
Well, I assume the AES chapter of New York is a very fruitful one, a good one. So that's another angle you can start at. Even if you're not an AES member, connect with them somehow through LinkedIn and find out what's going on. And there's might be a way to work that.
I have to say, getting into sales is a really good way to build a network. So I know it's not glamorous, but if you get a position at B&H or one of those stores and you're selling studio microphones and studio monitors, then you build up a network of people. That's a really good foot in the door. It's how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier because you were talking to David how you are a rep, and I don't know how many people even understand how things go to market. Because some manufacturers have their own direct sales, or all of us have some sort of direct sales. But the typical flow is that the manufacturer makes their products, and there's a representative who's independent of that manufacturer and probably represents other complementary, hopefully, brands, and they go into retailers or talk with integrators or studios or whoever and represent the products to them, and then those products are either purchased for consumption by like a studio or for resale by a B&H or somebody like that. So this whole notion of a rep, I only mention because that's another interesting angle. There are a lot of independent reps in and around the New York City area that it comes to mind. There's the Shure rep. There is New York City based. You never know. They may have need for somebody kind of like on an intern basis, or they may need somebody to do some of the social things that we've been talking about, et cetera. But again, it gets you in the game. And then you find out what else is going on. And then through that, you can decide maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe this is just a stepping stone to God knows where, but it's cool. So figure out where you want to be, where you are, where you want to live, and then kind of use that. I'm not a great example of this because I've always moved for all my career, so whatever. But ideally, I really respect those people that know where they want to be and just find out. I mean, Joe Pham's a perfect example of that with QSC, right? He's like the head honcho at QSC, and he lived in a certain area, drew a radius around where he lived and said, this is where I want to work, right? But we can all do that. We can all decide where we want to be and find the opportunities. They're more than you would imagine. There are more little Audix companies. There are more little rep firms and people like that always need talent.
It's a great stepping stone.
Yeah.
So one consideration on this, when you say audio engineering, I'm assuming we're taking the whole picture, right? Not just like maybe studio, mixing or something like that. It may not be today, but I think in the near term in New York, there are a lot of broadcast facilities that are not operating at full tilt, a lot. And a lot of the television broadcasting industry in the US, a lot of those are based out of New York or in the New York area. It may not all be downtown, but I would think through options on the broadcast side where you could get some mixing experience. There have been a lot of engineers that have been laid off or furloughed. And those businesses are going to come back, and they're going to come back very strong. And I think there's going to be a real demand for those skills to get those studios working again, get those broadcast trucks rolling, all these things that have been kind of ground down. So reach out to companies that are in the live sound services business in the New York area. Reach out to audio visual system integration companies that are looking for junior level help, maybe designing systems. You can get some experience doing system design. Be flexible and be proactive. And even if a company's not hiring today, be persistent And when these venues start to open up and a lot of those roles are going to need to be filled, those people are going to need to come back. And I think but I think some of them have moved on. So I think that there will be opportunities there. You just need to, I think, as was said earlier, cast a pretty wide net and just stay on it.
It's not, it's not the old school of you go work for a big company necessarily either. We're talking gig work and freelance. A lot of that stuff. I mean, we saw that in broadcast decades ago, where a lot of the broadcast companies were moving to freelance for their production crews, and so they're not necessarily employees of NBC, whatever. They're freelance people who are 1099s, and so it's not always easy to get into that, but once you show you can do something and you have the ability to deliver and provide a good product, you'll get a call back, and that may turn into that might be your life. You might be going from freelance to gig, which doesn't sound so bad to me, frankly, if it's what you want to do and if it's something that you like to do.
So Kevin has a question. He's piggybacking off of Yancey's, and Kevin can relocate anywhere. So he's wondering if there's a specific state right now that has a high demand in pro audio careers. Do you have any state recommendations for where he should look?
Good question.
I think traditionally we would have said Southern California, but I'm not sure, David.
I would have. I think Boston area. Goodness me. I mean, so many pro audio companies have spread their wings, and there's not really a center like there used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would second Boston from a software perspective, but something you said earlier, David, I think that there is a stigma that sales is bad. I mean, I remember as an engineering graduate and working and starting at Sennheiser as an engineer and then getting my first sales job. I remember our service manager coming to me saying, "Hey, you sold out." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You're going to be one of them. You're going to be a salesperson." I'm like, "Okay." I tried it out and I liked, it was kind of fun because I could talk about millivolts per Pascal. It was all right. So there, the sales opportunities exist in New York. Sweetwater is, the largest independent retailer in the United States. They have actually sales engineers that are based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But there's also streaming content. To the topic Chris was mentioning about broadcasters. You've got your traditional terrestrial broadcasters, but you have OTTs that are going to really become a staple in the future. You got Netflix out west. You've got Disney down in Florida. They're all over the place. So I think there's no easy answer to the question of which state. I think the question you really have to ask yourself is, what's your risk tolerance?
Yeah, Sweetwater is a really interesting one. And we've all been to visit them before. And Fort Wayne, Indiana is not a place that people traditionally say, when I grow up, that's where I want to live. But man, they've been able to pull some talent in there from all across our industry, former Guitar Center people and others, but also people who did. I was just there a couple months ago and talking to the guy who had done all the recording work for oh crap, can't remember who it was, but it was like, you did that and now you're doing this. Like, yeah, I got tired of doing that and I like this. And because Fort Wayne is not necessarily by its history, if you will, an exciting place, you'd think maybe it's not happening, but actually you go there and with all this talent that's coming in, they've got a live sound thing going on there. They got bands like crazy, and it's pretty cool. It's really pretty cool. And if you I know what they welcome in terms of the kind of backgrounds, the kind of talent. I think they'd be well. And frankly, it's not easy to get into either because they've become capable of being quite discerning. But I mean, you're essentially the sales engineer that Greg's talking about earlier. That person has as much revenue as like a traditional small Guitar Center. mean, one person develops a client base, and these are the people that I'm sure a lot of people on the call have their sales engineer at Sweetwater, because if you've ever bought anything from them, you have your guy or your gal that works there, and that's your person for life. And they take care of you. You take care, and they constantly call you, not hopefully in a badgering way, but because they get to know what you like and what you don't like and what you might need, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a pretty fascinating thing. And it's not, don't look at it like multi-level marketing kind of bad things in the past where, you sell whatever face lotion and, this, and it's not that kind of a business. I mean, it's real deal pro audio thing. And I don't know. I mean, if I was looking for a gig and I was willing to go anywhere, I would seriously entertain it, because it's also a really inexpensive place to live.
Yeah.
So you can live pretty high on the hog, unlike where David's at.
Yeah.
If you expand your search into the world of audio visual equipment, they call it integration, which is a lot of times a fancy word to say installations. You can go wherever you want, because there are school districts and churches and small theaters. It's not all the Super Bowl and the Grammy Awards, right? The vast majority of the business in pro audio and in video are in right under your nose. So if you're young, you're getting started, pick a fun city, and create a list of the top AV installation companies, whether it's on the residential side, which is sort of a different world than what we deal with in the commercial kind of pro side, and see if there's some opportunities there to leverage your audio engineering experience, because those companies are everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, so my son works for a AV integration company here in California, Western AV, and it's very diverse. Every day he's on a different location. Every day, one day he might be hanging a line array system in a church. The next day he's putting in a conferencing system in a council chamber. So he's traveled all over the country. He just came back from an Air Force base up in Northern California. He was on site there for a couple of weeks. It's just really exciting, and that's the system integration world. It's not what you might expect it to be. It's certainly not mixing bands or recording bands, but it's pretty cool, and it can tap into the talent that you already have.
Right.
One organization that's very closely associated with that world is Infocom. Yep. They've rebranded themselves as Avixa, AVIXA. That's a really good industry group, very strong, that represents that whole kind of integrator world. And I would invite you to really explore some avenues there, because I feel like they're overlooked by a lot of younger people in the industry. And that's where there's a lot of opportunities there, all over the country.
Very good money.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes. We have 9 minutes left. So we have 4 questions. So
lightning round, Karen.
Lightning round. From Neil, are there any other certifications or training I can obtain along with my audio production degree from Full Sail that could expand my job qualifications? And he's live mixing engineer, and he's in Memphis, Tennessee.
Well, here's an interesting one. You're just talking about Avixa or Infocom. They have something they call the CTS program, CTSD. I mean, you should look it up, and hopefully Stephanie can find Avixa and connect it. But that's a certification level from the basic building on up, where you demonstrate basic competence in both audio and video, which, if you have that, means something to a potential employer.
Yeah.
I think in particular, if you have any kind of, and it doesn't have to be deep background in IT or in networking, if you can build any experience in basic networking communication protocols, or be able to even just facilitate a conversation. You don't have to be the most senior expert IT person in the room, that goes a really long way these days as audio systems become, ever more tightly networked. So there's lots of great online, there's a world of online courses and certifications around IT and networking, and also specific to audio. So I think Steve mentioned Audinate earlier.
Yeah,
Audinate's got a whole range of offerings on Dante, and I'm sure Full Sail is involved with that. Those types of things are great add-ons to where the potential interviewer or a hiring manager might say, this person doesn't have much experience, but they spent this much time studying Dante, and I've got a list of Dante projects, a mile long, and we'll take whatever help we can get that's had that exposure. So there are some sort of small kind of things on the side like that are definitely helpful to look into as you continue to search.
I think when you think about certifications, a lot of times it's not so much the specific certification, it's that willingness to learn that's demonstrated, because you have these things, and it shows that maybe the three things that your certifications are not even relevant to the job, but you've shown that you like to learn stuff, and so they might want to hire you and send you to a course to learn the next thing because you're that kind of person, and it means a lot. That create that person who has a thirst for knowledge, man, that's the kind of person I want in my company.
Yeah. So let's move on to Darren. And you guys have been talking a lot about LinkedIn and using that to connect. So Darren wants to know if there are any groups on LinkedIn that any of you know that are good for meeting people in the field.
Pama.
There you go. Boom.
Pama. No, there's obviously, Pama plugs aside. The usual suspects, I would say, AES is pretty active there. Each company will have a company page where there's generally some activity, and that's a really easy way to find contacts at different manufacturers. If you're trying to get connected to someone, at Shore or whatever, like, you will find someone that you can connect to at a company that big, that is as established as it is on LinkedIn with a presence. So, spend some time, follow and track the companies that you're interested in, and get a sense for, how they're communicating and who's working in those organizations.
Yep.
And then look at Avixa, as we mentioned before, look at Pama, look at AES. NAM kind of more on the retailing side, but can be blurred. But those would be some off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go to the last two questions, we're going to have a survey I'd love for you guys to answer and send back. It's pretty easy. Stephanie's going to put the link in the chat. So if you could do that, and then it just will let us know what direction we should go in for future panels like this. So thank you. I appreciate that. Lido, he wants his one question is he wants some more detail as to what the audio engineers do within your individual companies.
Typically not audio engineering. So it's a great skill to have, and I've got a sound engineer who works for me as a product manager. He used to tour with Motorhead, Motley Crue, Eddie Money, but now he's a product manager for mixing console products. And the fact that he's got the chops really helps him to sell the product or pitch the product or design the product, but he doesn't actually do a lot of sound engineering as such. We also have folks that go out and demonstrate the product, whether it's at a trade show or whether they take it out on the road and visit customers. But again, they're not doing sound engineering. They're talking the talk, which is a very valuable asset to have, but they're setting the gear up, demonstrating it, packing it down. So as a manufacturer, there's not a lot of opportunity to practice that particular skill, but it is still highly sought after because it allows you to talk the talk.
Yeah, we in the past have had a really experienced audio engineer who kind of came off the road and went over to the manufacturing side, which is a fairly common sort of thing in the industry. And we would go to trade shows like the Infocom trade show or these other places, and a lot of end users of RF venue equipment, as well as the other companies here, are mixing shows or doing installs. And he was technically a salesperson, but his ability to connect with people at those trade shows to talk about what do you have going on? Well, I'm touring with these people, or I'm working on these installations. And he could talk the talk like no one else that was just stuck in headquarters working on the business side all day. So, you know, that background and that ability to facilitate a conversation is definitely valuable, and I think is used pretty frequently, actually, because a lot of systems are integrated. It's not just one thing. It's lots of things all connected and working together. So having that audio engineering background helps you have that conversation, which is valuable.
Yeah. So well sought after asset. And it doesn't stop him moonlighting, you know, at night or during the weekends as a recording engineer, but in his daytime job, it's just used in a different way.
But I think, David, I think you hit on it. I mean, there are those occasional things. I mean, while it's not in your job description necessarily, when you're going to a NAMM show or there's a demo room at an InfoComm or something like that, those are the people that get involved in doing that because we all know that they know what they're doing. Or if there's a demo room that needs to be set up in the facility or managed or whatever, to know that you have somebody on staff that really knows what they're talking about is key. But it probably won't be their standard job description. You won't come to QSC to do audio engineering per se as a classical job.
Okay, so we're at our last questions from Nicholas. He says he's also looking into following the audio engineer path. He's about a half an hour from Boston. Do any of you have any recommendations regarding companies hiring in this area?
Bose.
Get a job at Bose. I mean, they train their people, and I know so many people that started out career. I'm from outside Boston, and I know so many people that did early years of their career at Bose, and it benefited them greatly.
Yeah.
Sonos would be somebody else to look at.
Sonos.
Yeah, and the consumer side. There's a company called the Music People who are a wholesaler distributor. Wonderful group of people. They sell pro audio equipment and products to sort of B2B. So they're selling to other retailers or installers or production companies. But what a way to build a network across the whole country.
Yes.
For someone like the Music People.
Yeah,
and let's not forget to, you know, there's some good rental companies, and I heard some of your comments here about rental companies. You have Talamus, who does a lot of broadcast rentals in the area, and not too far away you have one of the larger production touring companies called Firehouse.
Yep.
So all those would be good options for you.
Boston Light and Sound, AVFX. I mean, there's a million college rooms that need audio in that town. Not to mention the trade show industry that's there. I mean, Boston's a great place to be for audio, for sure.
Okay. You guys got anything else to wrap this up?
Yes, a big thank you to Stephanie for doing an incredible job of facilitating this chat group. Stephanie, you need to ask for a raise. This is really exceptional.
She does a good job in that chat.
And thank you also, Karen, for organizing this. This was great. Thank you for the students and faculty and alumni for being part of this. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you very much. And please fill out the surveys and send them back so we can see how to improve on these and give students even more information in our next one.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.